What is happening? I got my boys with me, the gentlemen to my right on the screen, or on the left if you were looking from my perspective. I've got Ben Chase at Big Gentle Ben on the Twitter, and below us, bringing the knowledge north of the border, I got at Robbie Baseball 1. How you guys doing tonight?
Hey, doing well. The snow's starting to go away, so those of us who live in the northern part of the country, we like to have that go away and start to actually live like normal human beings again.
I like that. Coming out of the big frost. What about you, Robbie? You're farther north than us.
That's exactly right. I was just going to say, where your country ends, mine begins. And we are also heading out of the snow. Hopefully it doesn't come back. But in truck news, because I know you guys are both dying to I drove my truck back to the mechanic today to get a safety, and I'm waiting to hear back, hopefully tomorrow, fingers crossed, that 1979 Dodge W150 is road legal and I stop illegally driving it around everywhere.
We can't wait for you. I know that you can't wait, but we can't wait for you. You're going to post all the pictures of that beauty no longer riding dirty on the streets of Canada. So
absolutely. And I'm coming to lovely America next week. I'm going to UMass for a culinary showcase that I get to do, show off some Canadian cuisine that I'm doing. And I'm hoping to pick up some American apparel while I'm there. Not American apparel, but, you know, something related, baseball in and around that area. So if anyone's got suggestions, hit me up at Robbie Baseball 1 as to where I can go to get something legit. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, hit him up with that. And, you know, I'm going to ask for all the listeners, Canadian cuisine consists of poutine and what? It's a showcase of different gravies. Like, do you have different ways?
So what?
Maple syrup.
Great. So I do have maple syrup. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a maple syrup cured salmon, and we're getting we got sockeye salmon coming from beautiful British Columbia. So in and around your neck of the woods, and it's being flown all the way across. And maple syrup from my neck of the woods, and I cure that, and then I cold smoke it, and then I give it like a steam bath, and I serve it so that it's warm and it pulls apart, but it is as moist as some of Wander Franco's not finishing the sentence. And,
oh my!
Wow.
And then hold on, I'm not done. I'm done with that part. I'm also serving a sushi cup.
We're gonna get canceled.
You take a piece of nori, which we've got nori up in our neck of the woods, and barley, pearl barley, also grows in our Nordic lands. And you cook the barley, scoop it in, press it into a muffin tin, and then you bake it, and then you can put the salmon in it. And we've got some other like accoutrement to go in to show off some of our Canadian stuff. But I hope everyone's only thinking about the Wander Franco stuff right now.
Oh my god,
the salmon sounds delicious. I mean, those phenomenal, and everybody likes a moist piece of fish. So we'll just end it with that. Everybody that's here already knows who we are, but just so that you know, this is the Palazzo Podcast, 2 L's, 2 Z's, Prospect Power Hour. We've got some top 3, the big 3 and the next 3 for some teams, some that are north of the border, some that are by me, and some that are just east of everybody over in Pittsburgh. We're going to be talking about the Pirates, the Blue Jays, and my Seattle Mariners. If you're listening to us on a platform that allows for 5-star reviews, you know, we're here to hustle for you, entertain and educate. So please hit that 5-star button for us. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you need anything from us, you can always DM us on Twitter. All of our things are up here. So we are here for you, the listener, and the people out loud. So do you guys just want to get into it, or is there anything you want to get off your chest before we hit the big ones?
Oh, I'm clear, baby.
Oh my word.
Slice with salmon. So we're going to be talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pittsburgh Pirates 5 years ago, 10 years ago, were an organization that you wouldn't necessarily pay attention to their prospects. You'd wait for them to leave. And there was a series of prospects and bad deals that front office made and let go of that we've seen blossom all over the league. The crown jewel being Garrett Cole, who came into his own in Houston and has now been the dominant American League pitcher in New York for the last 3 years, and is generally one of the top 2 pitchers taken off the board, and has been that way since Moses had 2 tablets that had 10 commandments on it, it feels at times. But Pittsburgh's front office has changed, and Pittsburgh is really starting to do some really smart and good things, not only for their organization, but for the young players that are playing there. And so I'm real curious to pick the brains of you 2 smart gentlemen. We're going to start with Ben's top 3 Pittsburgh Pirates. Why don't you hit us up and let us know about these pitchers? You have 3 pitchers, none of their hitting prospects. Hit us with us, Ben. Talk to us about Skeens, Chandler, and Solometo.
So Skeens, I think everyone knows who he is, but this is what it looks like. This is what an elite stud starting pitching prospect looks like, with just oh my gosh stuff. And what I have written down here, the closest 2 arms in recent memory to come out of the draft as far as talent coming out of college would be Cole and Steven Strasburg. And that's huge comparisons, absolutely. But in raw stuff coming straight out of college, those are the only 2 you can really think of that compare in the last decade, 2 decades here. If he even, the funny part is he could even maybe have better raw stuff than either one of those 2, which is ridiculous to consider. He should see some major league time this year. He fits the Billy Bean has the good looking girlfriend, and not just that, but he has like the girlfriend. If you're from LSU, Olivia Dunn, their stud gymnast that has millions upon millions of social media followers. He's the guy, that's just, it's pretty darn easy to figure out him. Bubba Chandler is a guy who was originally drafted as a 2-way guy, and they've had him focus on pitching, which is honestly a little more rare to see a 2-guy end up on the mound than it is to see him swinging the bat. If he even gets his control up to average, this is a potential number 2, really good number 3 starter. Just 3 pitches that you could potentially put a plus grade on, and I really like his raw stuff. He's going to be a guy. He's still a year or even late 2025 away, but this is, if he takes that step forward with command this year, he's going to be a stud. And then my last one on here was Anthony Solometo, and in this system, it's a lot of pitching, a whole lot of pitching, as far as their elite guys. And it was just kind of a pick 'em as far as my 3rd guy. Solometo, I just really like the fact that he's got a nice mix of pitches. My only concern is there's one Madison Bumgarner. There's one guy who can do that delivery over and over and over again, and not, he flamed out early, quote unquote, but he also pitched a crap ton of innings on that arm before he finally did. So, there's only one guy who's done that like that. And that's the thing, is he comes with that low arm angle, kind of that long throwing arms and legs at you from all different directions. It looks a lot like Bumgarner. It really does. But so that's my biggest worry for him, is how that's going to hold up long-term. But the raw stuff, this is a guy who should be a mid-rotation and maybe even better type of arm from the left side. So
Ben, does he like to rodeo?
You took the words right out of my mouth. That guy needs to be on a horse bareback.
You should see him pinch hit. No.
So they've really kind of changed that organization. Like I was saying, their big prospects are pitchers, and it's no longer, are they going to make it? You feel like 2 of them are going to be, obviously somebody who's going to be potentially a top 10 starting pitcher in all of baseball. And then somebody who's going to be serviceable even in a 12-team league that,
Yep.
Bubba Chandler should be coming around, and then Solomento's just fun. So
yeah.
I like that. I like your guys' team lists. I'm going to transition real quick to Robbie's big three. I like your guys' team list this year because at least with Pittsburgh, you guys don't have a lot of agreement. So Robbie, if you have anything to add about Paul Skeens, go ahead and then tell us about your guys because you have a different picture.
Yeah, like Skeens is boring just because we have all the information, right? So it's nothing against him. Like I don't care about the girlfriend part.
Yeah,
but
you do.
Well, I only care when they get him in trouble. Wanderer number 2. Okay. But
Jesus.
beyond it, hey, hashtag never forget. Okay. But when you go to Jared Jones, who is the other pitcher, a fourth pitcher of the big P in Pittsburgh with their pitchers. Jared is 22, 6'1", 190, righty. But last year, I think he's the cusp guy. And Pittsburgh has struggled once they are up in the show to have them continue to be legitimate fantasy assets for us. And you just pick a position, right? I don't know a Pirate right now that I'm like, oh yeah, they drafted and developed him and he has been steady. There's been a lot of up and down. You can go back to McCutcheon, who's back there now, right? Up and down with him all the way through. Not that like everybody's solid at all times, but Jones, I think, could be up soon. He could have a good season if he gets 15 starts or so. The interesting thing is that when he got to AAA, all of the numbers went the wrong direction except for the strikeouts. 82 innings, still had 99 Ks. And where was he here? 44 innings and 47 Ks at AA, which is interesting. So I kind of like the idea that he could be coached up and efficient if he drops to, the bread and butter. But beyond that, he's an interesting guy. The other one I've picked, I shouldn't have, because again, name pronunciation is an issue. Even just speaking can be tough for me sometimes. Estura Suero. Anywho, we'll get back to that name pronunciation, but this was a DSL guy who was traded last year. I don't remember what the return was. I know he was part of the package from San Diego. So I don't know what moved that way, but again, I don't care. He got better when he got to Pittsburgh, which I like when we see a positive impact. It was less time in the complex league, but he increased his walk rate and decreased his K rate, which is great because he was at 10% with San Diego. He doubled it to 20%. He was at 30% for Ks. He dropped that down to 20%. There was also a third less at bats. I'm just going on the idea that we could see improvement. And if he gets put into A-ball this year, like low A with the promotion up, he's a switch hitter. He's exciting. He's 18 and change. This could be one of the guys. And they do have availability in the outfield in Pittsburgh. One of the guys, was it Mason Martin? Is that the right guy I'm thinking of? Who was a high school drafted guy who was coming along doing well. He's stalled out. I don't want to see the same thing here. But again, it's taken a long shot on this guy, but I also see the upside. And I did see his name. I had him on a list of like a watch guy. And then I saw him on some type of MLB.com potential breakout guys this year. So I was like, oh, I'm not alone. Okay, great. Some other person that actually gets paid to do this also likes this guy. So I feel a little bit better about my odds with him.
So you want to hear that trade?
Yes.
Is the Pirates traded Rich Hill and Ji-Man Choi to San Diego, and they got back Jackson Wolf, Alfonso Rivas, and Estuar Suero.
There we go.
That could end up being a real nice trade for Pittsburgh down the road, because I like Jackson Wolf, and I don't know if you've got him, but I don't have him on my next three. So that's a guy we weren't even going to talk about, but he's another good arm that they have down low in their system.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Geez, that's a weird one for San Diego. That's kind of like when Pittsburgh was similar situation. They were trying to get into the playoffs and they traded away Glasnow and Meadows, trying to get back some Tampa Bay impact guys. And I mean, that didn't work out. I mean, they made the playoffs. That was Russell Martin when he was on his streak of making every team he played on go to the playoffs. But anyway, that's Pittsburgh. Big three.
That's interesting. That's interesting because I don't think that I would have put Suero on any of my top three or even next three lists. That was a name that I'd heard, but I didn't know a whole lot of it or have interest in it. So I'm going to have to definitely.
It was a rabbit hole one night, just diving down onto like what's something that's interesting. And then I sell myself on him. And now I feel like, oh, somebody else has confirmed it. Okay, let's see where else I can find somebody talking. And it's hard in spring training, unless you've got like an Eric Birdland type for the Pirates, who I don't have, who can tell me about all these guys and what they're doing day to day, because they don't get written about, or at least they don't get written about that I can find it. So if you're a Pirates fan out there, and you've got that information, hit me up, Robbie Baseball 1, and let me know. I got some good Colorado writers a few years ago who directed me to not only their podcast, but also like their writings and stuff. And that really helped me out with Rockies prospects until they all sucked.
Yep.
Well, sometimes the truth hurts, and sometimes kindness is being direct and honest. So, I can appreciate that. Now, Ben, we're going to bring up your next three for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and Jared Jones is a name that we heard earlier. Tamar Johnson was one of the ones that I thought would have been in the top three for either one of you guys. So I'm curious about your take on him, and then Matt Gorski.
So Tamar, to me, is a guy who's right now, and BA described this really well. It's exactly what I saw last year. He's kind of a man in between two profiles. He can either hit for 300 plus, or he can give you 25 bombs. And he does not seem to be able to do both. It's when he swings for power, he has legit plus power. It's really fun to watch. But when he does it, he suddenly becomes the guy who's a 3 true outcomes sort of guy that's going to hit you 240. When he's hitting for contact, he's hitting line drives all over the place, and none of them leave the park. I just don't know what this guy is long term. He's not good enough defensively for us to really think that the defense is going to carry him. So he needs the bat to carry him. That said, I like the power if he goes that direction. I think he's got an excellent enough hit tool that he can succeed in that direction. But that's why he's not in the top three for me. It's because I just don't know what direction he's going right now.
Okay, fair enough. And that's, he seems to be somebody who's bubbling on a back burner. You keep waiting for him to pop off and something to happen with him, but it's just not enough attention to bring that up to the front burner yet. There's you in the front, Robbie Baseball.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to get my point in after that. The other factor with Tamar is that he's owned in all your dynasty leagues, and it was a hefty first round price that person paid to acquire him. They're not selling low. Like, the only time you see a first round pick this year in your fantasy league get dropped next year is when it's like an MPB guy like Fujinami who comes over and just stinks. Somebody got overexcited in the draft, like Rotorani did in a points league, and he mentioned that I haven't been mentioning him, but he screwed up, and he actually dropped Fujinami in a points league with salary cap implications because he's now a reliever with the Mets, and that's not what you want out of your first round pick. But you typically would never give up on a first round pick that early unless you're terrible at dynasty baseball. Again, like Rotorani, find him on Twitter at Rotorani. But a guy like Johnson, you are 100% going to wait out like 3 years, or you're going to get the next hot guy up that you're like, oh, I want that guy instead. I'm going to let this project go aside because he didn't immediately become a top 15, right? He's not Evan Carter. And that's what everybody's now waiting for. It's like, I want my high school pick this year to be a top 20 guy by mid-season, and then to be knocking on the door of top 10. That's how it should work. Yet every year, out of the 400 high schoolers that are drafted, that's wrong. From that, 5 might be viable fantasy assets immediately. Another 15 or 20 the next year might be like, oh, they're doing well, things are progressing, and then the rest of them have to very slowly come along, all the way to one of the guys with the Blue Jays who was drafted 6 years ago.
Right. So in my composite list that I did, Drew Jones, Drew Jones was your number 1 or number 2 pick last year. Tamar was, third to whatever in that same draft. Drew Jones was on 2 draft lists. I bet you're going to have a tough time, or 2 top 100 lists. I bet you're going to have a tough time buying him low. And Tamar Johnson is still on every single of those 6 lists that I checked out. He may not be a top 50 guy, but he's in that 50 to 100 group on every single one of those lists. And so he's still highly regarded as a prospect. So that's the trouble.
Well, wasn't he a college player when he came over?
No.
Not high school. Was he high school?
He was a high school. Yeah,
Okay,
high school but he was going to be a second baseman from the get-go. And so that kind of made him feel like an older prospect, because you normally don't move a guy from off a short right away. But I think it was pretty obvious he wasn't a shortstop as a major leaguer or as a pro. But my last guy here that we talked about Jones, and frankly, Robbie covered him well. There's not a lot I can throw in there, but Matt Gorski to me is one who's really fun. And he kind of, if he were in Seattle, he would really fit that system, in that he's a guy with a crap ton of tools. And one thing that's maybe going to hold him back from becoming a big time player, I think right now he could be an elite 4th, 5th outfielder defensively. He can play all 3 positions. He's got a hell of a cannon for an arm. And, this is a guy I believe has hit like 20 plus home runs for 3 straight seasons in the minors. So when he turns on one, he gets a hold of it, and he can still steal 20 bases plus. So the tools are there. The issue is he going to hit 250? Is he going to hit 220? Is it even going to get to that? And that's the big issue with him, is he's got a big loopy swing, all of the athleticism in the world, a lot of fun to watch him play the game, but the swings are ugly. I mean, they just, to put it bluntly, when he doesn't hit the ball well, it looks bad coming off his bat, like good high school or low end college bad swings. Okay. And so I really would like to see what Gorski could do this year if the Pirates are willing to push him up, because he got some AAA time in. I think he could be a solid backup outfielder right now. I just don't know, but it's one of those guys where if he ever got just good enough to have a starting job, this is a 2020 guy. And that's going to be huge for your fantasy club, but it's just, can he hit enough? So.
All right. Sorry, hit that button too quickly. I was going to say, Robbie, we're going to learn a lot of names for some of the casual today for your next big 3.
Yep.
Xander Muth, you've got Junsok Shim, and you've got Tony Blanco. And I don't know a whole lot about all 3 of those. And I like prospects. So educate me, educate the listeners. Talk to me about your guys.
Welcome to class, everybody. First thing I have to say off the top, I've accidentally deleted all of my notes for both Seattle and Pittsburgh. So if I'm looking down, I'm trying to get the information that I've deleted back. So I do apologize. I am absolutely zoned in listening. But I typically write things up in paragraph format. And then depending on how drunk I am, I'll just read what I've written, or I'll do what I'm about to do now. So anyway, so to the first guy, Xander Muth, 2nd round pick last year's draft, 6'6" behemoth, but he's 205, which makes him thin, quite thin, which is ideal for a pitcher. He's 18.7 years old right now, and he's coming out of high school. He did not have a pro debut last year. I swear I had his pitches, and I don't have them anymore. And I do apologize to the listener on that count. But this is somebody that I feel like Pittsburgh has been doing good things, as we've mentioned already, with their pitchers. We should see him debut complex this year. I don't think it's the right idea to push anyone of his size and age quickly unless they think time bomb here, like we've talked about with the Braves. Where they're all going to explode at some point in time. Talk to me about Ian Anderson later, Ben. And we want to see Muth come along slowly. We don't want to see him rocket up as like a 20-year-old and be on the cusp. We've all seen those tantalizing guys come up, and Anderson Espinosa is another one, right? Once the injuries kick in, everybody backs way off. So I think he could be a slow burn prospect. That's why he's on the second half here. Junsuk Shim here is a J2 class, J15, from 2023, a righty, 6'4", 215. I got a body type. Fastball is the big one for him. Slider, secondary, curve's the big one that's got to develop. Again, he's young, so the command is an issue, but he's young. So when you're young, you can beat the piss out of everybody with your fastball, and then you got to learn to pitch afterwards. So I did not say a changeup on here. That's going to be Pittsburgh's project for him. Make something out of his arm so that we can see it develop. And then Tony Blanco Jr., this was J2 2021, I think. And then he was supposed to be, what were the comps? The comps were comical at the time, but I remember in one of my dynasty leagues where we have an international free agency, he was my pick. And I think I had like $8 max to spend. I spent $6.50 on him. And I thought like, well worth it. You know, that's real money you got to spend just to get your prospects. Then they go into your league at 50 cents every year after that, blah, blah, blah. It's a great league, and Blanco's one of the guys who's, again, slow burn. He's now over. I feel like he did okay last year. Again, wouldn't it be fun to have notes? And as a lefty bat, I'm pretty sure he's righty. I was close. I knew it was one of the two, though, right? I knew it wasn't for sure. He's supposed to be, he's supposed to be a power first guy, and again, that was the calling card at the time, was like, he's an advanced hitter, advanced approach, good eye. It's a matter of watching that continue to develop. And with Pittsburgh's bad track record at first base, because they keep signing the oldest available MLBer for one more kick at the can, there is a path for someone like him to be able to come up and establish himself as a prospect of note, so that they don't do the Blue Jay thing of signing guys for 2 years. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So those are the guys.
Blanco is 6'6", and he's listed at 243. I've seen his pictures. If he's 243, I think I am going to go run a marathon tomorrow. I'm pretty
he's
sure.
Built like this. He's a tube.
Yeah, he is. He's a thick boy.
Thick boys. Yeah. Amen.
And you know, I was just going to make that comment that you say you have a type. Xander Muth he's another one. He's 6'6", and he's listed at 205. And once again, pretty sure that the Pirates got him into camp and said, so here is some steak, and this is what you're eating for breakfast. Here are 2 steaks. That's your lunch. And the boy, I bet you he's 2.25 at this point already. He is.
Oh, really? Okay, good.
He looks good. But man, I love the arm slot. I like guys who are smart with their arm slot. Like, there are guys who have that sidearm type arm slot, or have, you know, a little bit lower arm slot. He doesn't. He goes from a 3/4, he goes down to a sidearm. He does that shit intentionally. And I love a guy who is controlled enough in his delivery to be able to alter his arm slots. That's something you just don't see. And I think it's a weapon that can be used for a guy who knows how to do it right. I mean, we can go back and think about, I remember watching Roger Clemens drop down and throw a sidearm pitch once or twice in his career to get a strikeout. And it's crazy to think. And if you really want to get into the master of them, Bartolo Colon, I don't know if that man knew what arm slot he threw from by the end of his career. He was throwing stuff from every angle. And, you know, if you can control, and the thing is, he was hitting the zone with all of it. And that's just it. I love that ability if you can develop it. I mean, so yeah, this is a fun system. I mean, we didn't talk about a lot of really fun guys in here that get seriously. This is a system we could talk about for a while, and that hasn't been true of the Pittsburgh Pirates for a long stinking time.
No, that's absolutely the case. And you know, it's interesting. The next team that we're going to talk about has a very under the radar front office for the rest of the league. They always seem to be in contention. They always seem to have a good team and interesting names in their farm. But we've talked off camera a little bit, Robbie, and I know you have some different sentiments towards the front office of the Toronto Blue Jays, who Chad says, I don't know if you guys knew this, but when I make pasta, I like to put a little Damiano Parmigiani on it. So that third baseman's going to get some play this year. Hey, You guys both turned in these lists. So every time that I've sat down to have a conversation with you guys come up with these lists on your own. And sometimes they're fairly similar. This prospect grouping for Pittsburgh was not that way. You guys both have the same exact top.
Really? Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say all three. I was going to go.
Yeah, that's what. If we had the top 6, we got to quit. Podcast is over.
Yeah.
So if I go back and forth to you guys,
it's
nothing changes but the top. So let's just get into it. I'm gonna defer to you, Robbie. This is your team. This is your backyard. Why don't you take us down the top 3 with Toronto, and Ben, you hit him with some pushback.
Sure. So Ricky Tiedemann is the next coming of Christ. We can all agree, lefty, hyped up by the organization. Why? Well, they don't have a track record of success in developing starters. You want to take Alek Manoah last year and say, oh, come on, Alek Manoah. No. They drafted Alek Manoah ready to be a professional pitcher, and he was. And then they screwed him. They said, you're the big guy on the posters. You're our opening day starter. Oh, yeah, we signed Gosman for over $100+ million. Yeah, we've got all these other guys. But you're the guy. You're the guy in your early 20s who's going to lead this squad. Oh, all the other veteran pitchers, don't worry about them. You're the star. And it got right here. It got into his head. He couldn't sort himself out. He thought he had to run the show. He was the lowest paid pitcher by, $19 million or something. They had Bassett, everybody in on a free agent contract except him. They haven't developed legitimate starting pitcher with longevity since Stroman. And again, Stroman was a Duke guy, so he was kind of ready to go. So actual development. Nate Pearson was the one who prospect gurus are going to be like, yeah, I remember how that got all screwed up. Yeah, he was unhealthy, but they had the same issue dating back to Aaron Sanchez, which was at the same time as Stroman, which was also within the Thor class, and Justin Nicolino, if you want to remember a name that didn't amount to anything. These are all guys who were brought along slowly and have not had prolonged success outside of Stroman. Now I'd love to see Manoah turn it around. I'd really like to see Ricky Tiedemann buck the trend, but I am terrified of a 22-year-old who is in the same pocket with the same coaches and all these other things as all the failed. They're good with the veterans. They seem to struggle with the rookies. And Manoah is not the exception. Manoah is a special case in the sense that he had some issues in reporting to Buffalo last year, didn't want to do it, and then all that was kind of kept under wraps. But the gist was that they wanted to demote him, and he wanted to continue to be a Blue Jay. And there was like a lot of resentment towards the demotion. With Tiedemann, we don't want to see that. We want to think positively, but he's got to be with Manoah in AAA to start the year. They could potentially be coming up over the same weekend when some of the old boys start breaking down, or they've got, a long stretch like Boston starts the year. I think they've got like 24 games in 23 days. So a 6-man rotation could make sense for a bit. Toronto might be in a similar position where that's where we could see Ricky debut, where it's not in danger of him just having to join the club at a desperation. He can come up and positively help out, but he's got devastating stuff, like excellent pitcher. It's just the organization that scares me a bit with him. Orvelis Martinez, I was really hoping they were just going to give between him and Davis Schneider third base, because I'm pretty sure that's what Schneider played in AAA. I mentioned on a previous podcast a while back, why not go ahead and have a minimum wage player spread out amongst your veteran-laden lineup, which again, you developed Vlad, you developed Bo, developed whatever, give yourself some credit for that one. But Biggio really had a good year in AA, and since then has been with those two guys, and it has not, the skill level's not the same, obviously, as those two. But you had to bring in your outfield, your catching situation, you screwed it up 3 different times, and it's still Danny Jansen. When, he should have been gone long ago for somebody that had a bit more of a rounded game. You've taken the defensive approach, but then you also had Reese McGuire. There's a lot of badness within it. Martinez is going to suffer, is what I'm getting at, from not being given a position, because like you said, Sam, they're always competitive. So they're not willing to give a struggling hitter at bats. We watched Davis Schneider lose at bats in September when they were getting closer and closer to the playoffs. I think he had like an 0-for-19 streak. But what they don't talk about is the fact that he wasn't getting 4 at bats consistently in those games when it was happening. And I know when we were on with Potapalooza Fest, the mention from Justin Mason was about like the W stats, right? Like those are the stats that you lean on when you don't watch the player. And I'm not insulting Mr. Mason on that one. I'm stating that I've watched him play. I've watched Davis play, and he's good. And there's something about giving a guy who can run around your infield, at bats and opportunities. And the Blue Jays weren't willing to do that when it counted. Martinez, I think, is going to suffer from that. And then Berea is just, a hot toddy prospect from 2022. 3 pitches, fastball, slider, and he's got a changeup. So I like that. I think that's legitimate. I'm terrified of what the Jays are going to do with that. Don't screw that up.
Well, I will tell you, as a fan of a team that also tends to make the wrong move or move
come on, you got a homegrown rotation.
Hey, other than Castillo, Castillo wasn't homegrown.
Yeah, but you got him because of your homegrown talent that went elsewhere.
Come on.
Let's save it. Let's save that one. I'll get into that one.
Hey, 93, 94, you guys have championships. Like, you can always go back to that. We can't, right? We cannot. So until that
you had Ichiro, we had Batista.
We had
Vernon Wells.
Jesus, bless America. Are you kidding me? Like, we had all the talent and nothing happened for it. And so that illuminates my point that, like, that fear that you have, that you guys haven't done anything in 30 years, I think is to your point, is that you have experienced greatness as a Jays fan. And this isn't, you know, the difference between the approaches. Those early 90s Jays teams were on a mission. They were doing things. Joe Carter,
they were veteran laden. They also had the highest payroll in Major League Baseball when they won both years.
Right. Yeah. And I think, to your point, that it was a time in baseball where, like, you could hit your way into a lineup and they just wouldn't take you out. Like, St. Louis didn't mess with Albert Pujols. Pujols came up and started hitting, and he wasn't an elite prospect. They just couldn't get him off the diamond. And you talk about Davis Schneider and the year he had last year, and just get out of his way. Let some of these kids just play. You can afford, if you have 7 deep in the lineup, to say, hey, these 2 spots are for the kids in April and May. We really need to see what we have. We need to run them out there all the time. So I hope you're right. I mean, the point that I'm not trying to, be self-deprecating or the martyr about the Mariners never do shit, but, like, I'm with you that you have a team that just stay out of the kids' way for a little bit. Just see what you have. Mm-hmm. Just let them play. That's the whole point. Ben, you got any pushback or any things you want to add on those?
No, I guess the thing I was going to mention here, just looking at this, 86. Do you guys know what that is?
It's a number.
That number?
Correct. Playoff number?
It is the number of home runs that Elvis Martinez has hit in the last 3 years. That's, damn near 30 home runs a year.
Play
in the minor leagues.
Yep.
He's 22. He's 22.
And he's young, but look at what he did he struggled out of the gate in April of last year, but from May 1st on, the guy was something like 260, 360, 500. And even he got promoted to AAA. 55 games, 263, 340, 507. As a 21-year-old in AAA, hit 11 bombs in 55 games. Think about that. That's a home run in every 5 games. You don't think, 150 major league games, that sounds like 30 home runs to me. I don't know, but that's
what, Ben? You got to go sign the Falafel for 2 years. You're going to go sign Justin Turner for a year. You're just going to clog up that infield.
Oh, and Eduardo Escobar. What the hell did they do with Eduardo Escobar? What the hell?
It's a good version of the Colorado Rockies. It's watching a team, get in the way of themselves, but good enough to do it all the time.
Well, the rotation, the fact that they've been stable with the rotation, and the bullpen's been at times, and certainly not consistently, but at times saving them when needed. They're the type of team that, like, they don't win 18 out of 20. They're not dominating everybody, but they are winning. And of course, the AL East is tough. They're winning in the AL East. It's just, it's ugly, it's ugly. What does this say from chat?
Yeah,
By the way, it's.
Sorry, go ahead.
I
don't want to read.
By the way, it's very sad how far Zulu has fallen, because when Ben and his guest did this last year, Zulu was right up there, and now he isn't worth considering for the top 6 anymore.
Oh, he was an RP.
Robbie's point on the pitchers,
and that was what Jeff Ponce did that last year with us. Jeff of BA, and I think it was Toronto and maybe Philly is maybe the National League team that he covered with me. But Jeff even said, he's like, it's one of my favorite arms, but the reliever risk is incredibly high on this guy, and that's kind of what on Zulu, and that's what he is. Now, what I will say, what you saw with Zulu and what scared me there, I'm a little scared of with Barriera, who was listed at 180 and is not 180. And it's not that he went into the weight room and added to his 180. He went to McDonald's and to Burger King and to Wendy's and to all of those fun places. And it hurt him on the mound. It really did. I think he's struggling with his delivery in a large part because of he has added girth that he just doesn't know how to work around.
I've never understood why more major league teams don't take all of their Hall of Famers, and as soon as you draft these players and have them come up, you introduce them to who they want to become as players, and you have these elite, older statesmen of the game import upon the importance of work and routine and investing into your mental health, your physical health. There's so many of these kids that are just left. It feels like, and I don't mean to speak about any organization that I'm not a part of, but it feels like, as an outsider, that a lot of these kids are left to do things on their own, that they really, you get kids that make these decisions about how to eat. And you're an elite baseball prospect. You should be fueling the machine for performance. Like, not to speak about these kids like they're not human beings, like they're stocks or like a performance thing. But in this arena, from this lens, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. They spend how many millions of dollars on these kids, and they don't provide basic support. So
that's why until they stop. The fact that now I'm blanking on the guy's name. The Dodgers, the guy that they pay for his or put him on the roster every year just to make sure he gets mental health care.
Andrew Tolles.
Tolles. There we go. Yep. Yes, and that, to me, that is what a major league club should be doing. And the great part is they're following up on the commitment to that young man after he's no longer being a contributor to them as a baseball player anymore. That's huge. And that's these guys are
organization. What's going to be like? It gives them that reason to work harder. They have my back. I mean, you illustrate that point perfectly. That's what it should be all about.
And meanwhile, I mean, quite frankly, their crosstown team, the Angels. You talk to minor leaguers who've been around that organization, and they're like, I did get some toast and jelly one day before a game. That was really a nice deal.
Because I can't sign a lease anywhere because I get promoted.
It does seem odd. Like, it does seem odd to me, guys, that we're getting off the prospects at the moment, but it's all part of it at the end of the day. Is what is the cost to develop a program? I'm part of a university. We have strong athletic programs. We're known as like an engineering school and whatever. But we feed, I'm in the catering department. We feed the teams at different times of the year. Football team comes in, they eat a couple meals a day. That, it's specific things that we're trying to do, but it's not what I would deem to be the best things in the interest of the athletes at all times. A lot of it just comes down to budget. And this is a university with a budget, programs that have budgets. But if you're a major league baseball team, could you possibly spend more than $2 million a year, which would be less than signing whatever, and take a small percentage off of an international class one year, drop your draft budget back a little bit, a couple of guys, big bad truck universe. It's the real thing.
It's the real deal.
Yeah, but if you take a little investment and you could put, $2 million would go a hell of a long way with every single team in your organization to have like a chef. You don't need a nutritionist because you just need an intelligent person running your food program. They don't have to be a, registered nutritionist who can't necessarily cook food. You need someone who's going to help with that budgeting, purchasing whole foods for this, for the players, and like getting the good stuff in front of them. So when they come to the clubhouse, there's a meal when they arrive, there's a meal when they leave, when they're on the road, the things are planned out. Like anyone who does catering has a vague understanding at the very least of how you can accommodate things in a whole food based manner, which is what you want people burning 1 million calories to do, is get a lot of good in them. How on earth is it not seen as a top priority? No different than the housing, right? MLB teams go and buy apartment complexes in the communities, and your staff is in one, your players are in another. It doesn't matter. Like if you want to get into it, they all want business, right? It's all about the money. You buy the property, you own that building. If your team ever moves, you sell it for whatever, right? It's profit for you. But at the same time, you're going to have more of these guys develop, and if you can spare yourself one off-season signing of $10 million every year and pay one of your own developed players league minimum $700,000, you've just saved $9.3 million.
Right. And you talk about whole food solutions. The only thing I'll say about that tangent is, how hard is it to make bone broth? How hard is it to make foods that are good for connective tissues, for your immune system, that really help to supplement these, even fast food? Like calories are calories on a certain level when you're a young athlete and you're just burning a ton of calories. But
the pasta's fine when you're at a certain age. But
right. But to your point, is supplementing those diets with healthy options by spending time to invest in your investments, to protect the money that you've already spent, to give reason to the efforts that hundreds of people all across the country, and in Toronto's case, in 2 countries, are really trying to achieve. So, yeah.
So and this will kind of bring us back into the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays in 2021 were the first team to guarantee housing to all of their minor leaguers.
Toronto.
They provided it and this is all as MLB is trying to negotiate a freaking CBA, and the word that you got from all of the Buster Olneys and Ken Rosenthal's and all that was that the Toronto management team got a severe tongue lashing from the commissioner's office because they went outside of bounds, and they not only did that, they upped pay for the minor leaguers, so they're on their own. And they decided to provide I believe it was a nutritionist at that time, and now they've upgraded that to the point where they are providing all meals as well. And I think it's X amount of meals per day that they are providing. And so, but they have a nutritionist on staff with every single minor league team now. And so they're developing a feeding plan essentially for these guys. So that's what bugs me the most about Barry Area, is he's in like the organization that gives a dang about that crap, is willing to sit down with you and go, okay, so here's the best food plan for you to develop. And he's still put on the weight. Like, come on. But anyway,
we'll come back to your next 3, Ben, by saying it's crazy that this is considered exemplary behavior, bare minimums.
Yeah, bare minimum crap.
We have the next 3 for Toronto. And Ben, I want you to talk to us about Arjun Nimala, Kendry Rojas, and Emmanuel Bonilla.
So Arjun Nimala he's going to be a fun guy to watch. This is a guy that, honestly, when Toronto picked him, it reminded me so much of the draft when they pulled off Bo Bichette, because I kept watching him and going, ooh, who's going to grab him? Ooh. And the thing that really pissed me off is the Braves had like 3 picks that year before Toronto picked Bichette, which really, I was on Bichette that whole year. I loved him. He just did things a little quirky, and so it bugged other people, but man, the skills were obvious. With Nimala, the skills are freaking obvious. This kid is going to be legit as far as raw talent goes. It's a matter of how does he develop it. And it's already really fun to watch in the field. It's fun to watch at the plate. When he gets a hold of one, the guy's, he's like rail thin, and he puts a ball 10 rows deep on a good hit, let alone a really great hit. So then we go down the line here to Kendry Morales, Morales.
Former Blue Jay.
Former Blue Jay. Let's just keep him away from home plate. But Kendry Rojas, he's a guy who came over from Cuba in October of 2020, and I think this is a guy that is going to end up being one of those guys who throws a hell of a lot of average to above average stuff and ends up turning into a really good number 4 in the end as a lefty. That, or quite frankly, I said the other end of things is going to be, or the thing that I really appreciate already watching him, he pitches and doesn't throw. And we're talking about a kid in A-ball. That's something that good pitching prospects have to learn, is to go from that point of just throwing the ball because they can beat everyone by throwing it harder or throwing it with more break or whatever, but actually pitching to a spot and beating a batter to a spot. That's what Rojas really was doing by the end of last year. That impressed me. And my last guy is their guy last year that they got, their 2023 international signee, Emmanuel Bonilla. And I guess I was just really impressed with his raw power that he showed. And he takes a lot of pitches. He works counts well. I think this is a kid he's tooled up everywhere. I'm looking forward to seeing him play stateside and for sure hit full season ball by the end of this year. And this is a kid that's just, Toronto needs more raw talent of this level. And they seem not to have a whole lot of guys with this cross the board talent. And he's one that definitely has it. So
he was somebody that was not on any of my lists either. So I'm excited to get to hear him hit the ball this season, especially if he hits the ball like that. So that'll be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Robbie,
Hi.
Hi, how are you? You're over wandering around, but I want to bring you back over here to Landon Morotis, the previously mentioned Davis Schneider, and Jurin Watts-Brow. Tell us about your big 3 or your next big 3.
So Jurin Watts-Brown is the kind of college hitter. So college pitcher. I like the way that he attacks hitters. Is the thing that needs to change. And that's because he walks a lot of guys. So the command is not ideal, but he is similar in the vein of Manoah as far as a pitcher who can move quickly if he sorts himself out. I don't see him coming up, like within the year, anything like that. But what was his pick spot? I don't have that anymore. Close that. Perfect. He kind of, to me, looks like an SP4-5 type, not an SP2-3 type, certainly not an ace. The K to 9 was great, but the walks were huge, and that's going to be the big thing he needs to work on. But I like it. It's one of those competitor type guys, not necessarily the advanced stats that we love seeing, but that also leads into the 2017 28th round pick that Davis Schneider once was, who's now up with the Blue Jays, or is he? Is he a Bison to start this year? We don't know. We have to see how many old guys get hurt, whether he's got a job or not, whether he's making $2,000 every 2 weeks or $40-some thousand on a major league roster. But Schneider really came on last year, and nobody had him. Nobody was talking about him, and that's because he jumped 3 levels, I think, last year alone, and then into MLB. But he was someone who, kind of like you talked about Pujols, he just didn't get out, so they just continued to move him. A long time ago, they did this with, who was it? Dalton Pompey. He went 3 levels in 1 year and then ended up, and everyone's like, whoa, he's going to be amazing. And like, that was his peak, was in that moment, in that year. Whereas with Schneider, it's been such a slow burn, and he seems like such a content guy to, maybe play 4 out of 8 games, 4 out of 9 games. But again, if he goes down with the Bisons, it's more beneficial to him long term than sitting on the major league bench, not getting playing time. And Toronto has absolutely clogged that infield that I don't think he's going to have at bats. So he doesn't mean he won't be up in May. And, like, again, as a next three guy, it's the fact that he's not the starting second baseman. Biggio's still in the way.
How is that possible? How is Kevin Biggio still starting in the major leagues?
Remember when Ben Zobrist was being Ben Zobrist, and then everyone else within their organizations was like, who's that guy for us? Biggio got that tag with Toronto, and they've just been fighting it hard to not give up on the fact that he's not that guy, right? He's not that multi-position above average MLBer. And Biggio's just had pockets of success. Nothing against him. When he came up, he was taking way too many strikes, being way too patient, and then he changed his approach. And then all of a sudden, he was not the same player he once was before, where he needed a minor adjustment. Sorry, what's that, Chad? Man, Pompey brings back memories. That was back when every Blue Jay was busted, very much like the JP Arancibia debut time. Those were the days.
But Jason Worth.
Jason Worth, yeah. They haven't kept them all. But anyway, so Schneider, we know the deal with. And then Landis, 19-year-old pitcher, 2023 fourth-round pick. I like the guy. He has not yet debuted. When I was looking at video on him, I was like, this is somebody I'm putting on my draft board. But because he's a Blue Jay, I drop him down immediately. It's an organizational bias, but it's not. I have it with several teams. It's not specific to Toronto, right? Some teams you give them a bump, some teams you knock them back. With the Blue Jays, I just knock the guys back. Often that means I don't have many Blue Jays in my minor league system. To your point on J2 guys, they drafted Manuel Beltre signed Manuel Beltre once upon a time, I think 2020, maybe 2021, whenever it was, within the last 5 years. And he was really good at posting what he was doing on Instagram and all these other things. He'd already come over to the States prior to signing. But he's someone who's been very slowly developing within them. I kind of thought maybe he would be an interesting one to put on here, but I just prefer to talk about how much I dislike Toronto's pitching development. And I threw another guy in, and I would be happy if I was wrong. We want all these guys to work out and be major league assets and make lots of money for themselves and their families and all that crap. But there are people who get in their way. And for me, Landon is a absolute potential stud.
Chad, Manuel Beltre with you. Yeah. Primed to be a riser this year.
So the guy that you're talking about with the Blue Jays pitching development, the guy that I really wish was somewhere else, and I even have the organization picked out. If you put Adam Macko in the Cleveland organization, that is a future major league number 4 that would last for a long time doing that, because he knows how to work 6 different pitches. He isn't elite with his velocity, but that organization would figure out how to tell him, okay, so the slider's your it pitch other than your fastball, and we're going to pound the zone with those 2 and throw these other 4 as needed, and that's going to make you a stud. And that's a guy I love watching him pitch, because you watch it and you're watching like 6 legit different velocity readings come out because they are separated each. And so it's just fun to watch him pitch, but God dang it. It's just, that there's no way he makes it to the majors in this organization successful. That's just what sucks.
He can't. There was a lot of last year. Sam, what was your Mariner fan look at him? Like, how did you feel about him as a Mariner prospect, or was he under the radar?
No, he was in Everett, so I watched him pitch a couple times, and I like Macko. He's kind of a bulldog on the mound. He doesn't get frustrated. He seems to not be able to stay mentally sharp throughout the whole thing. There's always a hiccup. There's always an inning that seems like, he just got a little bit off, but then he's able to bring it back. And you expect to see that in high A, right? Like, you don't expect to see somebody who's polished and smooth. And so, I'm with you. I really like Macko as a prospect. I just don't think that he's going to stay healthy. I think there was a reason the Mariners were willing to trade him and Swanson. I don't. I don't think that
it's
he's
frustrating.
I don't think he's going to be a major league pitcher either. And I like him. Like I like Adam Macko. He's pretty good. So that brings us to the third team we are going to talk about today.
The Cardinals?
Seattle. Mariners. Now you were just talking about, sometimes you take prospects from other organizations and you might knock them down a couple pegs because of who they're with. And as much grief as our front office has gotten in the last couple of years for trying to see how far they can actually stick their foot in their mouth. And I think they got knee deep into their mouth a couple off seasons ago with Jerry Mather, the Rotarian who was part of the front office.
That was a mistake.
Oh my God. Again, I'm not going to rehash who's got the worst front office. We made our roster better and we eliminated costs. Go Jerry DiPoto. He's got a vision. Trader Jerry is doing things. And when you look at the Mariners prospects, you actually want to kind of move them up a couple spots because that organization, especially with their pitching lab, is really just putting out some fun, young, talented players. But I think that and I think that you guys would agree, we've seen the exodus of, these once in a decade pitching staffs that come through. I don't know if we'll ever see a Mariners staff homegrown as developed as they have with Wu and Miller and Logan Gilbert, George Kirby. We were joking a little bit about Castillo isn't homegrown talent, right. But if he's the pitcher that you're bringing in to supplement your rotation, I guess you can be forgiven, especially in that ballpark. But we have some fun players, and I think we're going to start with Ben. I want to bring up your big Seattle prospects. Where are you? Here we go. Cole Young, Harry Ford, and Colt Emerson. I am in love with all of them, but why don't you talk about them?
So Harry's kind of the one that sticks out in that group simply because he more fits what Seattle has been doing, which is getting freaking studly elite raw athletes and hoping they turn into baseball players. And that is why I love and Harry as a catcher, that's what he is. He's a freaking ridiculous athlete for a catcher. And honestly, right now, I think offensively, he's a guy that could go out and give you 10 home runs and 30 steals at a pretty decent average. But he's got a long ways to go in how he handles the staff. He's taken some big strides. I think the WBC was huge for him, having to handle 30-year-old men that were telling him to go sit your ass back down behind the plate, young man. I think it was a good thing for him. But there's some footwork stuff. Just some of that stuff behind the plate that takes a catcher a while to get. He's going to have some time, and that's fine because they had the big number. They don't need him to hurry up. But the thing I think is great about Young and Emerson both is they are the complete opposite of this system. These are two guys who have plus hit tools and then just have one hell of a feel for the game. The type of guys that are going to get you probably 15, 20 homers, 15, 20 steals. They're going to play a darn good defense. And you go, okay, that guy's not that fast. How did he get to that ball? But it's just, they're really smart ball players. They're instinctual ball players. And there's a reason why both of them have pushed up pretty damn quick through the system. Jesus, I'm really starting to curse. Shame on me. But, well, I can. I'm watching myself on screen right now. But in all seriousness, these are guys that are just, I was amazed how fast Cole Emerson moved up. But, when you watch him, the moment's never too big. He's never hit a moment that was just like, oh, yeah, that's going to kick his. No, he just moved up to his next spot. And then same thing with Cole. Yeah, just never was overwhelmed by the moment. And that's, it's something that you got to have once you get to the big leagues, but Jesus, to watch them do it so young. And in all seriousness, he doesn't even have 50 games in high A ball. If they started Young at Double A this year, do you think he'd really be that overmatched as a 20-year-old in Double A?
No, not at all.
That's
He
the thing.
shouldn't play at Everett this year. He should go straight to Double A or only be in Everett for April and a couple games in May. He needs to be up in Double A in that organization, and it's a great place to see prospects hit because it's such a pitcher's league. I've talked about that before. That whole minor league in Double A over there, they're all pitchers parks. It's really a tough place to hit, and I think that was part of why we got a bunch of hype with Evan White was that they talked about how well he hit in Arkansas. Shout out at Mr. White. I Gold Glove.
That's worked out great.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, he's now somewhere else. So,
I mean, a first base center fielder. I mean, what can be better?
I think that's what we're looking at with Harry Ford is that Harry Ford is gonna, with having Cal Raleigh on the team, he's gonna have to play outfielder and catcher, and I think he's going to by next year be the catching person that spells Cal Raleigh behind the plate. I think Cal Raleigh will catch 120 games, and Harry Ford will catch 40.
Did Garver sign a 2-year deal though?
Garver's going to be the DH.
He did sign a 2-year deal though, didn't he?
He did, and he's not going to see a single game behind.
If he catches, Seattle has lost their season. So,
oh my God,
this comes from a guy who watched a lot of Mitch Garver playing catcher in Minnesota because that was the big worry was when they got another guy in Minnesota who happened to graduate from a college in New Mexico in Ryan Jeffers, and they thought, oh God, he's going to be just as bad. No, Jeffers actually can catch a baseball. So there's just a slight difference, but no, this is going to be a fun system as we get into the next 3 to me, because you could pick all sorts of fun athletes beyond this. But these two, Young and Emerson, to me, stick out just in the fact that it's not their athleticism. It's their head that has got them so far ahead of the game, but they are just leaps and bounds beyond what a normal high school kid should be at this age or at this level. So.
Yeah, no, they're absolutely fun to watch. Robbie, you have Jonathan Clase and then Cole Emerson and Cole Young.
Yeah, I wanted more of an Asian feel with my Cole. So I went with
not a thing. That's not how that works.
It's Korean. It's not. This one's Korean. It's a different guy.
I don't even know what you're talking about. That's not how that works. So you have my favorite Mariners prospect, and I don't know if you did it to kiss my ass or you knew that I loved Clase.
Kissing.
I mean, you're a chef. I know what you guys do for flavor savers. So I really want to hear specific to me. We're all wearing beards. I mean, come on, just let that go. Let it go. I could go on for years about probably a good 5 minutes about Jonathan Clase. Okay. Why do you have him as your big 3? Because that's a bold move. The Mariners have a lot of other names that people would put there. So talk to me about your love for Jonathan Clase.
Yeah, so within all of my rankings, I'm taking into consideration the dynasty value of the player. And sometimes with Young and Emerson, they, again, like we talked about with Tamar a while back, it was all about getting somebody early, paying a high dynasty, draft pick, whatever, to get him, and you're holding on to that guy. Jonathan is not that guy. He was stolen in so many leagues where people didn't realize he was available for whatever reason. It happened in 2 of my dynasty leagues, and both 30-team leagues with a ton of smart players in them. I got him in one league after I missed him in the other. And I remember at the time thinking like, oh, that was done. I missed him. I didn't realize. And then immediately, boom, bump him up 50 spots on my board. I want to get him. And then I've been watching what we can all watch when we check out the statistics page. And it's like, well, I mean, he's elite OBP at low level. Okay, he got his promotion last year, full season. He's okay OBP. But he's also just generally taking more walks and stealing more bases. And when you look at him, he looks Altuve-like. I like that. I like the idea of that kind of guy. Switch hitter. I like the idea of that kind of guy. Center fielder, when you want to protect Julio, you want to protect the franchise. You have somebody here who you don't want as a 4th outfielder. You want him to project as a good enough defender to play every day,
Yes.
80 grade speed, I'm all over it. I think that's great. As much as I like Emerson and Young, the development for Mariners infielders is as good on the same level as Blue Jays pitchers. There aren't any, right? They don't have
Perry Hill is amazing. Working with infielders, getting them to play defense and putting them in a position to be successful at the plate because they've taken care of that other part, that play on the field. The Mariners are awesome. And I sorry, I hate to interrupt, but I'm about to just blow up here. You talk about Altuve and like when you talk about these short kings like Altuve and Betts, where I don't want to mistake Clase for either of those players. I'm not trying to put that kind of hype.
You're saying he's better than both.
No,
is that right?
No. But so we were talking about getting to see Mako and last year, maybe it was 2 years ago. I think it was last year, the beginning of the season, Noel Marte and Clase started the season at in Everett. And you know, when Noel Marte is on and is part of the game, he's the best player on the field. You just get that feeling that he's, you know, if he's not the best, he's one of the top 3 players on the field. Clase had that same riz. He had that same swag that he would give off, that he's such an athlete. And he came through the last 2 years. His hit tool isn't as bad as people want to say it is. I think he's a 260 to 280 hitter. And, you know, it was Chad that was saying that he could be a 1590 guy and it's not bluster. I think that's absolutely right. I have him more as a 2070 guy. I really think that power is coming through. And I think that there are going to be people that are sleeping on his ability to make contact. If he gets the time to run, I think you could be looking at a 10-year run of the fastest guy that we've seen in years. And it's not just fast, it's instinctual. He is fun to watch on the base paths because the defense has no idea how to stop it. And they know it's coming. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's like in football when you have 4th and 1 and you know they're going to be running it up the middle.
Right.
And
you know the play. You just
everything. Sorry, Chad just said that. Yeah, fair enough. I don't want to compare Clase to any Rockies prospects, Chad. Nobody wants to make those confusions, but I'm excited about him. I've been following him for the last 3 years. He's the first prospect that I fell in love with when I started doing content, and I'm all in on him. I haven't seen anything yet that makes me pump the brakes, and so it's exciting to hear other people who are semi-rational and pay attention to this stuff way too much to agree with me. So you guys have done my heart well. I can go get my doctor checkup tomorrow. He's going to say you're in great health simply because of this. So I can't thank you guys enough for indulging me on Clase. But we're going to talk about the next 3 up for both you guys, because this has some difference. And we're going to do Robbie. Where's your next 3 that we have here? Nope, that's not it. Here we go. I found it. Nope.
That's Ben's.
I lied. I don't think Robbie has an X3.
That's okay. Mine could just be secrets.
There we go. I lied. Jeter Martinez, a great baseball name with Teddy McGraw, and then Felman Celestin. So talk to us about your next big 3 prospects.
Sure. Martinez fits my pitcher mold. He's tall. He's not can shaped. And he is highly sought after in dynasty leagues at the moment. So he was one of the guys from the 2023 J15 class, and at what's 18 now. We're going to get to see what he can actually do on field, get to see what the projection is, fastball, slider, changeup. That's what we're seeing. But I mean, let's see what the changeup really is. Is it just written down, or is it legitimate that this is a pitch he throws? And I'm quite intrigued at this young man and the system that he's in. And again, bump the prospect up. I like the system that he's in. They've had success with their current major league rotation. They've also traded away guys at their prospect peak, potentially Mako traded away at his peak. That Williamson guy that ended up with the Reds, same dealio. They built him up. Maybe if he would have stayed within the system, he could have, maintained that elite K-9 that he had previously. Next guy up is Teddy McGraw, third rounder last year's draft. Tommy John wrecked the stock because he didn't get in full time, but this is an absolute under the radar guy who can come back slow. We have seen the Sam Carlsons of the world with the Mariners, so we don't have to get too crazy on every pitcher will succeed. Carlson was drafted out of high school, injury trouble. I think he's with Milwaukee now. I don't even know if he's debuted yet, but he was a lefty that I bought a lot of stock in at the time. I think 18, maybe 19, when he was drafted. But with McGraw, it's a college righty, and even if he ends up with a bullpen, rise up to try to match with the age so that he's into AA a little quicker than you might want him to be, I could see him then transitioning into starting again. That could be a real thing for him, where again Seattle could have an SP45 type that could come up and be good, but we got to see what he comes back from Tommy John with. And then for the feline, you can call him that because he's quick like a cat, and he could match base for base with Class A. He's a shortstop. He's younger. He was a J15 last year as well. I think, both him and Martinez were last year's class. And Seattle's done well in different years with these guys. They've signed well. They've developed, and at the right time, either bolstered them up the system, like we've seen with Julio, obviously special player with him, but also Gonzalez, right? That was another guy that it hasn't worked.
Now it goes with the Twins.
Yeah, it hasn't worked out as much with one of the guys that I have the most prospect stock in, which was Starlin Aguilar. But I haven't completely given up because he had a moment, and maybe he'll get it back. Maybe he needs that dietitian and that chef. But anyway, all those guys that I like, 18, and 22, time is not necessarily on McGraw's side, but the recovery from Tommy John could get him right back on the map. But at this moment, he's easier to go and get, very much like Martinez and the feline. I should just call him the cat. I mean, it just makes sense to me. So anyway, those are my next three.
I like that nickname for him because he's really smooth. When you watch him play, it doesn't seem like anything's forced. He's got just he looks like a baseball player. He really is smooth at the plate and in the field. And I think you're right. I think that there's a lot of names ahead of him in the middle infield in that organization that are fun to watch, but he could rise to the top. He's so young, and he's got it. So, that hit tool continues around. He's got power, and he plays a up the middle defense. So,
and the Mariners move bodies, right? Like DePoto will move. He'll move like an Emerson or a Young if the right thing is there to make his MLB team better. No different than he would move any of these next three if he believes it will make his MLB team better. He'll do it. So it doesn't, just because there's guys there, like with Toronto, it's a problem to me because they clog the MLB with low ceiling guys and floor types. And then that prevents the Martinez's from being able to just come up and play. They've got to perform and then come up and perform again. Whereas, with Seattle, we could see bodies moving in and out. And all of a sudden, the guy that's fourth or fifth on the depth chart in middle infield, boom, becomes next man up.
Well, I would have loved to have seen a body move out for a third baseman this offseason, but I'm not going to complain about that.
You got Brian Anderson. You shouldn't complain.
I don't. I'm just going to stop.
Luis Urias.
Yeah.
I mean, you gave up on Toro. That was your real mistake. You gave up on Abraham Toro.
And he's now at Milwaukee, right? Like he's
in Oakland, and he should be an everyday third baseman in April. I mean, we've watched the A's not screw up. We've watched the A's give a lot of opportunity to guys. Kevin Smith last year. Toro might take it this year. He could be the Brent Rooker.
Okay. Hey, I would
former
Abraham Toro and former Astro. Good dude.
Yep.
Just overall good dude. So, Ben, we're going to look at your last three, and you've got Jonathan Clase as your next big prospect. So thank you for including him on your top six, but you included Lazaro Montes and Ty Pete. And I love Lazaro Montes. So tell us a little bit about these two prospects.
So Montes is a big boy. He is listed right now at 6'3", 210, which is I mean, he's legit gained about an inch or two of height, but he's also legit gained about 55 pounds. So that's not small. But the power is absolutely just ridiculous. It is double plus power, and that's, you just cannot teach that. It just doesn't show up for a player. And yeah, you can add strength, you can do a lot of things to help some guys along the way to there, but and the thing is, he's not a zero defensively. Of course, he's not moving anywhere near like he once did, but you're talking about a guy who's got a plus arm. This would be a perfect right field profile if he could keep himself in shape, because he gained 55 pounds and probably 40 of it was not good weight. So that's where the struggle comes. And then you're talking about a guy who's, lefty swinger, but a righty thrower. And what I've personal bias here is that a guy who's right-handed thrower and left-handed swinger, if they get out of shape, tend to have more issues with their swing. Just something I've noticed. Guys who have cross, if you're a lefty thrower and a righty swinger, which there aren't very many of them, but your swing on your opposite side tends to get messed up when you get overweight. And I don't know, or overweight for your particular frame. And not everyone's overweight as everyone else is overweight, folks. So, Prince Fielder was always in shape. Lazaro Montes, I could absolutely see him doing very, very well as, I don't know. I mean, he's going to need to work on his contact skills, but then from there, you got a long ways to go that this guy could do very, very well. Working up the level. Next one is, I'm just going to mention my little thing on Class A before we go out, because I'm probably going to piss everyone off, but
mute him, Sam.
No, I want to hear this.
But
say it with your chest, Ben.
Going from A ball to Double A, the bat did not have anywhere near the impact. It got knocked out of his hands quite a bit in Double A. The speed is still freaking amazing, but the bat got knocked out of his hands a bit in Double A, and that worries me as he works towards the majors. It's something he's going to have to definitely be aware of and work on.
So just go back and look at his second half of August and his September stats. Is when he started.
I did.
He went to Arkansas, which is a pitcher's park. And I'm just going to quote Aaron Rodgers, who I will never, ever quote again. I promise.
Relax.
No,
and that's just it. This is, in all seriousness, this is something that the response that I have, or the comparison I have here. I watched Ozzie Albies in Rome, which is low A at the time, but the guy hit 0 home runs and made it look like even getting a double was going to be a massive feat for him. And now he's a 30 home run hitter in the major leagues. He made a lot of adjustments along the way in order to tap into that, but he knew he had to, because the bat was literally getting knocked out of his hands as soon as he got up to advanced pitching, which is kind of what I saw with Closet. He made some adjustments later in the year. It cost him a little bit in his patience at the plate. He was trying to be aggressive with that swing to adjust to better pitching. He's got to find that nice medium this year. That's really where he's at. The skills are fun. The tools are fun with him. But Ty Pete leads into just a crap load of guys that are holy crap athletes, holy crap, and you guys, we already mentioned Feldon or Celestin or however,
the cat.
Cat. Feline.
Wait a minute.
Mr. Miyagi.
Did you just say Andres Galarraga?
I sure did.
Oh,
look at this, man. Of course
I miss Andres. He came back to the Braves after his cancer and hit 40 dongs. He was a fun guy to watch that year. He was bawling the day that he hit his 40th. It was a really fun anyway, I have nothing but love for Big Cat.
Oh,
But
he was one of those players that you wanted to watch. He brought it every game. He had a ton of passion and was really good. So,
but there is just a lot of guys in this system. Farmelo's another one. Ryan Bliss is another one.
Yep.
I mean, Alberto Rodriguez, when he's not fat, is another one. Dal Joseph that they just signed is another guy. These are all guys that are just elite in both, or not elite, but are guys who potentially could be plus power and speed. It's a matter of how much are they going to hit. And so I picked Pete just because I'm a sucker for a guy who is a two-way guy, and Pete was up to 95 on the mound as a junior. And in fact, most of his college offers were as a pitcher, but then he ended up injuring his shoulder or something, not elbow, but, or maybe it was, I don't know. But anyway, he couldn't pitch in his senior year of high school, or chose not to, and focused on hitting. And that's how the Mariners got him. And he's a guy who I think he's probably a third baseman. Maybe he ends up in a corner outfield spot, but this is a guy that could be another 20 home run, 20 plus steal guy. He's just, is he going to hit 220, 240, or 280? And he has the legit ability. This is the type of guy who he hasn't been focusing as a position player for long enough to where you can say this is who he is as a contact hitter. So let's see what he does on the position side now.
Well, there could be a great trade between the Rockies and the Mariners where they could not solve each other's problems, but they could really help each other out, where whatever the Mariner SP 4-5 guy that's not quite clicking, plus their next man up prospect type pitcher, can go to Colorado along with one of the hot, coals of the Mariners, and get back Chase Dollander, so that there could, he could not be sunk for all the dynasty guys out there by being in Colorado. And that's the type of move that Dipoto could, he would pull it off, right? As we've mentioned, he's not afraid to trade players, but that could be one, because Colorado looks for specific type of pitchers. And in getting Dollander, they're bucking their own trend here, but it's not going to work out for fantasy. So I would like to see that trade. I used to try really hard to reach out to Dipoto, and they do that, the whatever they call the podcast that the Mariners do. So I used to send
Lookout Landing.
Is that what it was called? No, it was
I don't know. That's their website. I'm just saying, that's one of their better fan websites out there.
It's like Dipoto's on the podcast. It's quite a thing that they actually do it. Yeah.
Sulk.
What's that?
KJR 7:10 a.m. or something. That's
it's part of their TV, like their TV thing, whatever they call it on what's
Root
their network?
Sports.
Root Sports. Not Locked On. No, thank you. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You can find it. Google it if you care. But he's on it, and with the two announcers for the Mariners, and they talk at times, and he's been great and very honest on it. But he also has struggled mightily to build bullpens, and that's what he was as a major league, player. So I find it funny that what he actually did, he struggled to find players that he thinks can succeed in those roles. Munoz, that trade, that Aaron Nola trade, or Austin Nola, sorry, Austin Nola trade has just paid off in spades.
Are you saying that the Mariners are not doing well at developing bullpen arms?
Prior to that Nola trade, they had struggled. That was before Sewald was revived. Munoz was hurt at the time of that trade, but they then brought guys in and had success. They used to have crappy bullpens.
The lab is only 4 years old. The lab was definitely not pre-2020. I agree with you on that, but I thought you were saying that as of today they're not developing.
No. They are the team that you look for in dynasty leagues.
Right.
Yeah, you look for them in dynasty leagues, especially points leagues. You're like, who can I get that can get me points without being their closer? Just like somebody to fill in really deep leagues, because those are guys who could eventually develop into a Sewald of the world. Now,
I want to talk about three names real quick that weren't brought up in your guys's top three and next three. I'm a big fan still of Emerson Hancock. He had talent coming out of, wasn't he from Georgia? He was a Bulldog, I believe.
Yep.
And he's in the perfect organization that he didn't have to be rushed to the majors to be legitimate. He's been allowed to struggle and kind of figure some things out in his head. And I think this offseason, seeing the return of some of his velocity and some of that confidence, you see these players and it's half of it is physical and 90% of it is mental, like what's going on in their head. And I think that Emerson Hancock this year could be a glue guy for that starting rotation if and when there are some of those names that we talked about before that fall out due to injury or something. I'm a big fan of Locklear at first base and third base. Mm-hmm. That kid just looks, I want him to be our third baseman, although I don't think he's got the glove for it. I think if Ty France doesn't show off some driveline gains, this is going to be a season that Tyler Locklear might be up in T-Mobile and make some things happen. And then you started talking about Johnny Formello, the high school outfielder that we got. He is just a tick slower than Class A and has a better bat than Class A. And mm-hmm. he could be that next player that you're just like, oh my God, why did I not pick him in the first year player draft? Why did I let him go by? It's almost like there's prospect fatigue at time with Mariners prospects because we just went through a ton of them. And I think Formello is a have to own or roster. I think that you have to go out and try to acquire him for your team. And so if you didn't draft him already, so those are three names. And it's obvious that, of all the teams that we talked about this year, Pittsburgh's system is on the up and up, and Toronto's always got interesting names, but the Mariners are deep, and a lot of the players that we talked about today are probably top two tiers in the other teams' systems. That if you were to move Formello to either system, you'd be talking about them with even more like, oh, this guy might have an opportunity to play earlier. Oh, yeah. The Mariners are so deep in outfield. So go for it.
A little quick thing on Formello, and then I'll talk a little on Hancock. But Formello, I'm in 3 different leagues with industry people, 3 different dynasties that have been going for a few years with a couple of different industry folks. Formello in every one of my FYPDs this year has been picked by an industry guy.
Yeah.
That tells you something, that when the smart ones are picking a particular player, that's, and for what it's worth, I had him like on my queue for my next pick when Matt Eddy just picked him in the most recent time that this happened. So he's well known. I think it's kind of funny because there's a lot of difference, and I want to say, was he just ahead of Kendall George or just behind of Kendall George? But there's a lot of difference in the talk you hear about the Dodgers picking Kendall George and the Mariners picking Johnny Formello, and coming into the draft, they were very, very similarly ranked.
Right.
But a lot of people have very different opinions on those two players now. Emerson Hancock, the big thing that worries me is a shoulder, and he's now missed big chunks of 2 seasons with shoulder stuff. And I love Emerson's when he's healthy and when he's pitching. He's a guy that just attacks on the mound. Even when he doesn't have his best stuff, he attacks on the mound, and he usually gets pretty solid results because of that. But what really, really, one of my favorite guys from development up to the majors that I got to follow was Mike Soroka, and his shoulder has absolutely been the downfall of his career. This was a guy who went toe-to-toe with Jacob deGrom as a rookie and beat him when Jacob was posting like a 1.40 ERA for the year. So Soroka was going to be the goods, and shoulder issues have just completely derailed his entire career. And I'm a little worried more worried now on shoulders than I was prior to Soroka's issues, because to me, it used to be, well, shoulder, elbow, your arm goes down, your arm goes down. Well, it just seems like those shoulders are something that tends to come back. If you really have major shoulder issues, it tends to be something that kind of haunts you and follows you wherever you go. So that's my only worry with Hancock.
Well, I don't know if shoulder injuries are contagious, but I'm sure he got something rubbing up against the other Atlanta pitchers because none of them, all kinds of reasons, can't seem to put 2, 3, 4 years together. I think that you have that with any pitcher. I think that, when we talk about any pitcher, it has to be, and it's heightened because he's had some shoulder injuries, but I don't know how you think about a pitching prospect and not worry about those things. I don't know how they're not, especially with how, the game has moved, that you're not just throwing 90 to 92, 120 pitches. You're trying to throw 100,
So as the looking at it strictly from a fantasy standpoint, he wasn't on either of mine simply because he's at a point in his professional life similar to Julio Urias was within the injuries mounting, and no one's going to trade him because they are waiting to see what he can actually do. But there's that history there of shoulder injury. Mm-hmm. And that's a legit fear. Like with Urias, as he was super young when he came up with the Dodgers as well, and then was down and hurt, and the performance wasn't there, and everything came back, and then he all of a sudden really appeared and had a couple good years. And I'm not sure what Urias is doing right now. He's probably beat somewhere, but that's not what we want to see. Yeah, there we go. Double head shake from both the guys there, and that's too.
We're wandering again.
Yeah, but that's like a legitimate thing. Like sometimes with shoulders you run away, sometimes you just wait and see what's going on. And with Urias is the comparable that I have with Emerson, where it was highly touted. You want to see what they can do. You're really believing in the performance. So they're not easy to acquire. You're going to have to give up a legitimate top 10, 15 fantasy type arm to get him. He's not going to because that team is banking on production for him. So whoever you're going to try to acquire him from, they're not like, oh yeah, I'll take a first baseman. No. Like you got to give up a pitcher that has a better track record for health, most likely, probably could, be up and be in a rotation legitimately. And just the outlook might be better for you to hold your guy and not go get a risk in Emerson. Let's see what Emerson can do, over the next 18 months. Mm-hmm. And then we'll know kind of what his true fate is. But by that time, he won't be a prospect anymore. But that's kind of the issue I had with him was I don't know how to tell anyone. Like, I wouldn't want you to go out and get him and give up a highly touted pitcher of some sort.
Oh, no. If we're talking from a fantasy aspect, he's a pitcher that you acquire if you can get him as a throw-in, if you can get somebody who's soured on him, if you see somebody's like the Mariners have a starting five that they're not going to get, nobody's going to crack that without injury, and they're probably going out of the organization if something happens. If they're having a good season, they're not going to promote from within.
They're going to add a pro. They're not going to promote from within. Last year they promoted from within, and it looked great. They now all, they have to go back and repeat that performance. Like we saw, Miller really drop off after having an outstanding debut. And he's a real major league pitcher now, but let's see what he can genuinely do. Right. Same with Wu.
Yeah. And that's, they went 3 years, 4 years in a row where they drafted a college pitcher. I mean, Kirby and Gilbert and Hancock, I think were all three their first picks in a row. And they were drafting other strong arms at that time. But I think they saw, okay, now our system is full of them, and you still got some good arms in the system. I mean, Walter Ford is a guy that I really like.
The vanilla missile, let's go.
I think there's a lot still to go. I love, Robbie mentioned him. I love the Teddy McGraw pick. I think that's a smart pick. But I mean, there's a lot of fun pitchers, especially if you get down into their 20 plus on their system. They got a lot of guys that could become something as a pitcher.
Yeah,
but see, that's where they were. Brian Wu was a 20 something in their top 30 that turned into something.
And wasn't he an injury guy too? Or am I mistaken with Wu as being injured acquired?
That's why he fell in the draft, I believe. Yeah, but I mean, that's kind of the thing that
like a McGraw.
Yeah, But I mean, you got a lot of guys down in that range that, you know, I don't know if you want to get into a guy like a Jimmy Joyce, who's nothing tremendously special, but that's a guy who's got 3 legit pitches. He could either be a really good drive you nuts as a reliever that comes in and with the bases loaded and gets a ground ball double play every time, or he could be that guy that could end up being a sinker slider guy and pitch 180 innings like a, you know, Derek Lowe type of guy where he just
or NASCAR driver. Just thinking out loud with the name. Like,
this is true. This is true. When you got a name like that, you know,
you're definitely getting on a pit crew.
That, you know, you're not wrong.
I'm certainly not right.
there's a lot that ain't right.
You can bring that expertise to us. So if
that's back up and I heard Ford, and I was like, oh, is there a Chevy or Dodge on that team? One thing I did want to mention is spring training. I know spring training stats is a big thing. Ty and I used to talk about on Dingers all the time. It was a fun point for us. Like, you weigh who the hit came against and da 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 da. But I saw Kirby talking to like a group of reporters about how he is throwing a knuckleball. And like, I thought that was so cool that he's like, oh yeah, like I'll throw it, you know, spring training. I used to see a lot of reports where guys are trying a pitch all spring training and then they just put it back in the tank. They're not pulling it back out during the season. It's not one of their pitches. But sometimes, as we had seen with Frankie Montas before, when you're in a desperate situation or you really want to up your K to 9, you keep that pitch. And I would love to see Kirby becoming a wonky kind of, you know, add that extra element to him. Because the knock that I've heard on Kirby from others who just try to say, oh, he's not, you know, SP1 material. He could be your inning eater Stroman type. The K to 9 is not going to be great. Is he throws something like that out there, you know, 0.5% of the time. Every other start, we see one in, you know, whatever, 2-2 count. And that would just like screw with everybody just enough to really keep him on their toes if he was to genuinely be keeping that as like a strike throwing pitch, not, you know, I'm up 0-2 or whatever.
He would immediately replace Jamie Moyer as my favorite Seattle Mariners pitcher of all time.
If he started to incorporate it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Because you know that he could throw it, right? Like that's
exactly it.
You know that if he decided to throw that shit, you know that he's going to throw it, and he's going to throw it well. And what are you doing? Like, because he's going to throw 99 on the corner. So like, literally, fuck you on the plate. Like you're not hitting anything he throws if he develops a real knuckleball.
Yeah, like if you are struggling, if he doesn't have his stuff, you know, he notices it in warm up, right? Some nights you go out and you're not loose, whatever. I know it in hockey in warm up. Like 2 minutes, once I'm on the ice, I'm like, this is a good night or a bad one. And it completely changes how I approach the rest of that night. Athletes are the same thing within their sport. If he's like, yeah, tonight might be the night that my first pitch is a knuckleball. Like, we're just going to throw some junk and see what happens. I would love to just see teams or players with that skill set throw it out. Cause I have thrown a lot of knuckleballs, and like the odd time that the thing actually has that movement is the reason why I keep doing it. So
that is why I love Matt Waldrop with the Padres, because that's literally one of his 4 pitches is a knuckleball. He isn't a knuckleballer. He throws a knuckleball as an off-speed pitch. I think that's a cool way to do it.
Oh, so, absolutely. Anyway. Absolutely. It needs to be part of a portfolio, not a one-trick pony. You know, R.A. Dickey was great. Tim Wakefield, rest in peace. Like, I loved watching you pitch in Boston and for Pittsburgh. And like, no. Have that be, you know, part of an arsenal. You'll never hit it. You'll literally, you have position players that can throw eephus pitchers to major league batters and strike them out, right? Like, we've seen position players. Freddie Freeman it was the first baseman for the Yankees. It was
Rizzo.
Rizzo struck out Freeman when they were going Atlanta. Like, so you know that these kind of things can happen. I just don't know what you do with Kirby if he threw a knuckleball on a regular basis. It would just be so gross. And it is slight sacrilege. I actually have met and know Jamie Moyer. He's a better human being than he was a baseball player. And to just, people know that you're throwing 80 miles an hour, and to strike out big league hitters, even only 7 Ks per 9, you weren't getting walked, and you weren't getting hard contact. You were never comfortable in that batter's box. So I understand the sacrilege, but I'm telling you right now, George Kirby is the funnest Mariner pitcher to watch, and they're all great, and you can get behind all of them, but Kirby is ridiculous.
I gotta ask, what's more sacrilege? Disliking Jamie Moyer or disliking Felix?
So I go to Jamie Moyer, right? Because it's obviously not it's Randy Johnson, it's Felix Hernandez. There's a couple other Mariners pitchers that if you were to put them up, the top 3, top 5 that would be past him. Felix Hernandez is the most underrated pitcher in the history of baseball. And the fact that he suffered through so many shitty Mariners teams and could only win 10, 11 games because the Mariners were literally scoring a run and a half to support him most seasons is Felix Hernandez was a lot of fun and might be my second favorite pitcher, him and Randy Johnson. But Kirby is, I think Kirby has a chance to be the best baseball pitcher that the Mariners have ever produced. And I hope that they sign him for the rest of his life. He needs to be pitching at T-Mobile in that parks to highlight his numbers even more. I want to see what he can do, and it's the best place to pitch. So let's keep him there for the next 10 years. I'm all for it. We have talked so long tonight about do you two, I know Robbie, you have some love for some Braves pitching you want to talk about, is that right?
I want to do it after. This one's been so long that we'll do it privately, because I want to hear the opinion, and we can bring it up at once we're done the big 3 next 3.
I love it. Sorry, listeners, nobody gets to be in the room while we talk about that. So that's just how that is.
Join my OnlyFans.
Oh my God, I'm going to wander over there right away. Before we go though, Ben, do you got anything for the people? Do you have anything to say? Any love you need to share?
No, next week on the Palazzo stream, our man Chad has set up an interview with the one, the only Bob Kendrick with the Negro League Baseball Museum.
Let's go.
That will be a lot of fun. And please, yeah, only trucks. Oh boy. But no, please let your friends know, because this is going to be one heck of a show. I love Bob. I've never once heard the man talk and not learn something. And trust me, I've listened to a whole lot of his talks, and I still learn something every single time I do. The man is just a wealth of knowledge about the Negro Leagues. It'll be a lot of fun.
No, I absolutely agree. I think that that's a home run for getting to talk baseball just in general. There's probably not a lot of fantasy, but if you love baseball, if you love the history and perspective, if you want to learn something, we all want to learn every day, be better human beings, be better at what we're doing. It's time that you should carve out for sure. So I absolutely agree with you. That's can't miss baseball conversation. Robbie, what about you? What do you got before we run away?
I said my piece off the top. I'm excited to finish off our 30 teams and then transition ourselves into what is next for the Prospects Power Hour. It's been a good off season, and we're getting close. Games are starting to be more interesting, by the day, and where, somebody is in the lineup may or may not be important. And the manager may or may not tell us that it is or is not important. But it's good to have baseball back. It's warming up a bit, and I'll take it. So it's happiness, good vibes. And, everybody hope my truck passes safety.
We all hope that your truck passes safety for sure.
Maybe someday I'll shut up about it, but
Please don't. Please don't.
Man.
Hey, you know, I just want to say that it's been awesome. The last couple of weeks, it's been draft season. I don't know if you two are in TGFBI, but I'm in round 30.
23. Oh my God, you're so far ahead.
Yeah. So we're almost done with that. We've had a good group. I got Kyle Bland from Pitchers List and Vlad Sedler's in the league, and just a bunch of other fun and good drafters. It's been quite the room to be in. Raz Slam started today. Through 8 hours, we had been through 3 picks, so I might be picking my first pick on Wednesday. We'll see how that goes. But that's the magic of draft season, right? You never know what kind of room you're going to go in, how the movement's going to go. But hopefully everybody that's been watching has been doing drafts or is really just, you know, waist deep in their draft research and prep. This is going to be a fun season for all of us. I cannot wait. And I hope Acuna is healthy. I just want to shout out that, you know, baseball is better with a healthy Ronald Acuna Jr. So I really hope this knee is truly about nothing and we can go back to seeing him do Ronald Acuna things.
Absolutely.
So for Benjamin Chase and Robbie Baseball below me, I am Sam. And I'd like to say from the Palazzo Podcast, Prospects Power Hour, peace and love.